In the key, kick out, Davenport.
A steal for Kentucky. Ahead to Reeves, left wing three, got it! Johnson weaves.
A dunk bounces off the 80 and he slams it home.
All right, welcome back to episode 13, I believe. 13 or 14, maybe. I'm not sure. I believe episode 14 of the student section. Once again, real quick, I just want to apologize for last episode with the low quality of my audio. But once again, it only got like 4 views as I'm recording this, and it was about 5 days ago I posted it. It's only at like 4 views. As expected, I did mention in that video that my NBA videos get a lot different views compared to my college videos. So hopefully this NBA video gets a little bit, a little more traction than my last one, but I did make sure my mic is on. My quality is up to par for this one. I even made my bed. This is the first time I've made my bed in probably 4 or 5, maybe even 6 episodes. It's been a while. But here we are. I'm ready. So obviously, you know what? Maybe I'll address it, but here in a second. But I remember seeing a stat that this is like the. Hold on, my mind is all over the place. Let me get started. Obviously, I'm going to recap on the semifinal games series, and I'm also going to preview the finals. But before we get there, I'm going to leave timestamps down below, so if you want to skip to either of those 2 topics, you can. The first thing I want to cover, the main inspiration I got this from is watching KOT4Q, Kenny Beecham. Most of you guys probably know who that is. And his podcast, Numbers on the Board, aka Through the Wire. They had mentioned about how, once again, this is another year where we have a new champion. And I know, obviously, we haven't got a champion yet, but the Celtics or the Mavericks didn't win last year, so this is a new champion. And I went back and looked. Since the year 2018 all the way to now, that's, how much is that, 6 years? So the past 6 champions have all been a different team. You look at 18 was obviously the Warriors, 2019 was the Raptors, 2020 is the Lakers, 21 is the Bucks, then you have the Warriors in 22, and then you get the Nuggets in 23, and then now this year it's either going to be the Mavericks or the Celtics. And I really started to think, like, people talking about how this is crazy, and I started to think, why are we no longer getting dynasties? Because, I mean, you look at the Warriors, they were dominating from 2015 to 2018. Obviously, they didn't win every series, and I would even argue as far as 2019, even though they didn't win, and people still consider their dynasty continuing over to 22. I don't really know if I would really count that, but that's besides the point. Because you look back in history, and obviously, once again, this is just a 6-year stretch, so this could still eventually change. But you look in history, the 80s, you could even go back as far as like the 60s and 70s was dominated by the Lakers and the Philadelphia Warriors at the time. I believe they were the Philadelphia Warriors, and the Celtics. And then the Celtics and Lakers dominance carried over into the 80s with Magic and Bird. And then the 90s was dominated by the Chicago Bulls with Jordan. And then the Rockets got a few rings here and there. And then you move into the 2000s where you look at the Spurs with Tim Duncan and the Lakers with Kobe and Shaq, or Pau Gasol, whichever one you look at. And then the 2010s, you had the Heat / a little bit of a carryover for the Spurs, and then you also look at the Warriors dynasty. Pretty much every decade has been dominated by a dynasty or a couple of dynasties. This is the first decade really in the entire NBA history, and once again, we're technically only 4 or 5 years into this decade, but normally you'd have a dynasty by now. This is the first time in NBA history where we don't really have one team or one franchise just dominating all the others. And I started to look, and I'm like, why is this? I think the main reason this is because there are more top-heavy / more elite players than we've ever seen. Historically, you look at, whenever Jordan was dominating, he was the top of the league. But then you also have Hakeem, who got a few trophies here and there. You also look at the 80s with Magic and Bird. They were at the top of the competition. You look at Kobe and Shaq / Tim Duncan. Mainly, I would say Tim Duncan's the top talent, obviously. And those guys were leagues ahead of everyone else. And you start to look now, there isn't really a single player who's head and shoulders above everyone. Obviously, you look at Nikola Jokic, he's the consensus top player in the league. But you have Jokic, Giannis, Luka, Embiid, Kevin Durant, he's kind of fallen out a little bit, but he's still up there in that elite category. Even LeBron, Anthony Davis, you have these guys that are at the top of the league. Jason Tatum, Steph Curry. You have so many players that are in this top 10 that are super dominant, can lead their team to a finals, that it's more players than ever. So you get this turnaround each year towards a different new team because one player is better this year than the next. You don't really have a player who's head and shoulders above everyone else that can sort of give that dominant / just dynasty kind of effect. Obviously, you have franchise players, but you don't have dynasty players. Another thing I'm kind of looking at is just the whole the player empowerment you've seen recently. You see a lot of players requesting trades. You look at Kyrie, Kevin Durant, not Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, James Harden. There have been a lot of players recently, Anthony Davis, who have been requesting trades. And even more so down to the lower level players like role players, even some role players, like you look at Ben Simmons. When he requested a trade, he definitely wasn't a star. I would say he's more a role player at that point in his career. But there's a lot more player empowerment. Players are getting paid more, which kind of moves me into my next topic with this idea, is that role players are becoming more and more valuable. You look at Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon, Jordan Poole. I guess you can't really say Jordan Poole anymore, but whenever he was with the Warriors, Andrew Wiggins, once again, whenever they were winning with the Warriors, role players are becoming more and more expensive. The prime example of that is Bruce Brown not returning back to the Nuggets because another team is going to offer him that money. And I don't feel like these role players are starting to become overpaid. I think they're starting to become properly valued. I think teams are starting to realize the value in a role player. Because you look at all these recent champions in this time frame I'm talking about, there have been elite role players. You look at the Celtics, obviously you have Drew Holiday, Derek White, and I can't remember his name right now. I'm blanking. Al Horford, sorry. You look at last year with the Nuggets, you have Bruce Brown, Christian Brown, you have MPJ, Aaron Gordon, you have a lot of elite role players. The Warriors, like I said, they had Wiggins, Jordan Poole. Klay Thompson, I guess, at that point was also a role player. And then the Bucks, I guess they had Bobby Portis. You have I don't remember who was on the roster. I guess Drew Holiday is technically a role player, but he was still part of the top 3 on that team. But you just look at these role players, and they're starting to become more and more and more valuable, which just makes it harder for teams to keep these role players year after year after year or replace them over time. And another part of that, team building aspect in terms of a dynasty, is the new luxury tax / second apron, just / overall team pricing, team budgeting. The main thing that this kind of relates to right now is with the Timberwolves. They're becoming a very expensive team. I'll talk about this more later, but it's kind of hard to manage a team and keep the same players that help you win a championship. Because believe it or not, once these players win a championship, every single player on this team becomes more expensive, no matter what happens. You look at Jordan Poole, you look at Wiggins, after they won that championship, they both got huge extensions. If I'm not mistaken, Aaron Gordon either got extended or is expected to get extended soon with a very good contract here. But just overall, once these teams win a championship, every player on your roster becomes more expensive, which makes it even harder to make this team come back and return these players. Which just overall just kind of hinders the ability to build a team. And the most recent thing being that that second apron they implemented. I'm not sure all the details with it. I just know it makes it harder to build a team. And once you go into the luxury tax, you end up paying more. You get fined more, whatever. Or you're not even allowed to sign certain players once you hit that second apron. I'm not too involved with all the financial aspects of team building. I just know that exists and that makes it hard to build teams. So that's why I look at it, and that's kind of my interpretation as to why team building is getting harder and harder and harder, and you don't really see dynasties anymore. Because you look at whoever wins, the Mavericks or the Celtics. Obviously, the Celtics have a chance to build a dynasty if they can return this roster they have now, which is so top-heavy. But let's say they don't make it, because, the past few years they really haven't made it either. But if the Mavericks win, very well next year, you could see the Timberwolves going in and winning. The Bucks could be healthy. They can come back and win. And Embiid could be healthy, can come through and win. There's a lot of teams that could take this spot. So you could just see this cycle continuing to grow. And even if the Celtics win, what players do they end up having to trade because of salary? Which players are they unable to re-sign because of salary? And same thing with the Mavericks. Obviously, everyone knows they got Luka for the low, or not Luka. They got Kyrie for a super cheap deal. They just traded like Dorian Finney-Smith and who else? Dinwiddie, Spencer Dinwiddie. I'm pretty sure was a part of that trade. They pretty much just traded nothing and like a first and a second maybe, for Kyrie. And then obviously they had the trades they got PJ Washington, and they got Daniel Gafford. They're basically able to pick these guys up on like their lowest value, even though they were still technically valuable. But because they were on teams that weren't really competing, they didn't have that sort of that value. Once teams are competing, their players are more valuable. Once you win a championship, your players are more valuable. So that's pretty much my whole idea on this whole dynasty thing. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And then moving on, I'm going to just kind of quickly recap the semifinals. Starting with the Timberwolves, just because they were the kind of biggest surprise. They went in, swept the Suns, beat the reigning champs. They had a lot of momentum, a lot of hype around them. Anthony Edwards obviously had that. Cat kind of had expectations. Rudy, and they had a gentleman's sweep. They didn't get swept, but they had the gentleman's sweep. They lost 4-1, 5-game series. Now, looking at it right now, it's easy to say that was a failure. Just to write off the entire season as a failure because they ended up losing 5-1. You could say that series was a failure, but objectively, the Wolves had a good season. Not many people projected them in the beginning of the season to even be a top 4 team, let alone a lot of people had them projected to be in the play-in situation, which I thought was a little bit of a stretch, but most people had them around that 6th seed range. But they obviously exceeded those expectations, getting 3rd in the West, but pretty much competing for first place throughout the entire season. They had the best defense. They come into the playoffs with one of the best offenses, as well as that best defense. Obviously, kind of flared out in those semifinals, but objectively, it is a good season. And honestly, you could say subjectively too. It's kind of hard to argue that it wasn't a good season just based off of preseason expectations, making it to the semifinals. Because this team didn't really have finals expectations up until pretty much the start of the playoffs. And even then, a lot of people had them losing to the Suns, people had them losing to the Nuggets, and then some people had them losing to the Mavericks. I didn't. I'll admit I was wrong. But this is a very important season, or off season, for the Wolves. I already talked about the whole just luxury tax that they're going to have to go into, because you look at guys like Jaden McDaniels, Rudy Gobert, Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, and Nasri. These are all really expensive players. So they can they bring back players like Mike Conley? Can they bring back a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker? Can they bring back Kyle Anderson? Can they bring back these guys because they're already paying so much money? And they're having this little bit of a ownership fiasco, as of most of you guys probably know. Their current owner, I don't know his name. He historically doesn't go in the luxury tax. I think he's only done it once or twice in the past 20 years. Maybe now that they have a competitive team, he's willing to go into that luxury tax. But he was wanting to sell this team. A lot of people know. I'm just kind of recapping. He wanted to sell this team. I think Aaron Rodriguez, A-Rod, was the guy that was looking to buy the team. But since they had a good season this year, the owner was kind of like, all right, I don't want to sell this team anymore. Let's slow down. But then Aaron Rodriguez is like, well, you already agreed to sell it, blah, blah, blah. Legal stuff, I don't really care about the legal stuff. And I think people had said, or I think the current owner of the Wolves had came out and said the reason he doesn't want to sell the team is because he knows Aaron Rodriguez doesn't want to pay that luxury tax. But you look, historically, this current owner doesn't want to pay that luxury tax either. But like I said, because they're finally competitive, maybe he just bites the bullet, buys into this team that he has now. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think it's very important for this offseason. And the last thing I kind of want to mention, other than like people saying that Rudy Gobert is not a good defender, which he is one of the best paint defenders, but I've always been under the assumption he's just... I've had this opinion with Rudy Gobert where it's like, he is one of the best rim defenders, but if he's not able to do anything else on the basketball court, why is he valued so highly? The way I kind of compare it to is you have a guy like Isaiah Joe or Luke Kennard. Are they, either of those guys, are they as valuable as Rudy Gobert? Because Rudy Gobert technically only really does one thing on the court, and that's defend the rim. He can't defend on the perimeter. He cannot shoot the ball, cannot dribble. He can barely catch the ball, can barely dunk the ball. He's so weak under the rim, has no post moves. He's literally just there to defend the rim. And he's one of the greatest of all time at doing that. So, with that being said, why are guys like that are strictly shooters, why are they not valued as much? Why are guys that are strictly playmakers, why are they not valued as much? Why are guys that are strictly on-ball defenders, why are they not valued as much? I've kind of always held this sort of just weird idea, like why is he valued so much more? Obviously, people mention the fact that a layup is the easiest shot in the game, and if you have a guy like Rudy Gobert who is so good at deterring that, he's worth that money. But there are plenty of other guys in the league who can do that same thing, obviously not as elite. But you look at Victor Wembanyama, the guy that Rudy Gobert was traded from the I can't even remember the team that he was on now, the Jazz. Walker Kessler, he is one of the best rim defenders this season, or maybe last season, just statistically. You have guys like Jared Allen who can do the same thing, Jaren Jackson Jr., who's more versatile than Rudy Gobert. He's not as good of an on-ball rim defender, but he's a good help defender, can guard the perimeter, switch, he can do a lot of things, same with Bam Adebayo. I've always been in question with his overall value, but with that being said, I'm not saying that the Rudy Gobert trade was a bad trade. In my opinion, because they made it this far and they look to compete, like they look set to compete for the next few years, I think that's a good trade, win trade. I am just a little concerned, just his overall value. How much is he? I don't think the team is going to trade him because he does provide so much to this team, but just at some points he wasn't even playable. In the series, they played Naz Reid over him, and it's just kind of like, this is one of your max player guys. Anyways, I just went on a long tangent. The other thing I want to mention is just the thing with Cat. Everyone knows he fouls a lot. And not even just that he fouls a lot, he makes a lot of dumb fouls. And my main thing, if Cat is watching this, which I know there's probably like a 0.01% chance that he's watching this, Cat is no longer a young player in this league. That's a lot of guys in around that age range, like Devin Booker, D'Angelo Russell. You look at Brandon Ingram, Cat. These guys are no longer young players in the league. And I'm mainly saying this for Cat. He needs to develop some sort of just basketball IQ where he's not just committing these dumb fouls on people that are committing an off-ball foul or committing just a foul on a dude who's going up to dunk the ball and he's going to make the shot no matter what. You just slap him on the arm and get a foul. Stuff like that just he needs to grow out of it. And if I'm Cat, this whole offseason, work on not fouling. Just none of those tic-tac fouls. Run a whole bunch of pickup games and just try not to get a single foul. That I don't know what to say. Just stop fouling. That's such a mental thing for him. He just needs to get over it. He needs to learn how to just not foul. It's so hard. It's so frustrating watching Cat because he's such a good offensively skilled player. He's so hard to guard because no one's really big enough to guard him. And if they are big enough, they're not really quick enough to guard him. He has such a deep skill set. He can make his own shot off the three. He can post up. He can catch lobs a little bit. He's dunked on a few people here and there. He's such a good player, but the fact that he can't play because he's always in foul trouble is such it just hurts this Timberwolves team overall. You saw that a lot with this Maverick series. You pretty much saw it the entire playoffs, but more so with this Maverick series and the Nuggets series. Even Anthony Edwards was saying he's got to stop fouling. Cat has to stop fouling. But that's pretty much everything I want to say for the Timberwolves. Moving on with the Pacers. My main fear with the Pacers is that they do a similar thing that the 2021 Hawks did. If you guys don't remember, the Atlanta Hawks made it to the conference finals that year, and they lost to the Bucks in 5, very similar to how the Pacers got swept. I don't want the Pacers to become complacent and get this sort of false hope / false reality that they are now this championship contender team because they made the conference finals / semifinals. That's what the Hawks did. They made those conference finals. They picked up DeJounte Murray, and they kept trying to compete with this team that really wasn't there, and they weren't really making enough moves to help just level this team up. And I don't want the Pacers to make that same mistake. Hopefully, the front office / coaching staff / players / everyone in the entire franchise, even fans, can recognize you beat a Bucks team that didn't have their 2 best players, which is Giannis and Dame. You beat a Knicks team that was severely injured. They were missing 5 or 6 rotation players, missing Jalen Brunson most of the time. They didn't have a Julius Randle. OG was out. Josh Hart ended up getting injured throughout the series. And then you lost to the Celtics team, which you got swept. I mean, yes, it was a close series, but you still got swept. Hopefully this team isn't let's just run it back. Hopefully they don't do the same thing that Kings did last year, where they just run it back with continuity and consistency and try and just compete with the same team, because that's not going to be how it is. Embiid's going to become healthy. The Bucks are probably going to be healthy. There are teams that are getting better. The Magic, the Cavs. Who knows what the Cavs are going to do? But these teams are getting better. The Pacers cannot become complacent. The Knicks will be healthy. You have to continue to try and build and develop this team. What do? I'm not sure. I believe that they need more shot creation on the perimeter. Pascal Siakam can create shots, but he's more so a mid-range post kind of worker. Tyrese Halliburton can create shots to an extent, but I remember I've seen memes where people talk about how Tyrese Halliburton doesn't have any sort of dribble animations equipped, and he doesn't use the right stick. 2K players know what I'm talking about, but he doesn't use the right stick to dribble. He pretty much just bounces the ball. I mean, that's a little exaggerated, but I think they need a secondary perimeter shot creator. I don't know who that is, but I think that would help them out a lot. Maybe if they can get Paul George to come back, which I think there's I'm pretty sure he's gone out and said he's not coming back to Indiana, but that'd be cool if they could get him somehow, but I just don't see that happening. I don't think I have anything else I want to say about the Pacers. That's everything I want to mention. So moving on to the finals preview, who I think is going to win, what I think is going to happen, what I expect to happen. The first thing I want to address is I see a lot of mainly Twitter talk, but it's kind of made its way onto like mainstream media with the analyst talk show. People are kind of mentioning this. People are saying that the Celtics have this easy path, and so now the Celtics are kind of put up in this lose-lose situation. If they win the finals, it's, yeah, you're supposed to win the finals, you're the best team. And if you lose the finals, it's how did you lose, you were the super team. I think I've already mentioned this in a couple of episodes. And a lot of people are saying that the Celtics, they've had the easiest path just because all the teams they played, they were better than. Obviously, all the teams, if they're going to make it to the finals, they were better than every single team they played. It's that simple. Whether they were injured or not, they were the better team. And everyone knew this coming in. I don't know why people are acting like this. Oh, they had an easy path. The Celtics have been the best team the entire season. Throughout the regular season, throughout the playoffs, roster, you look at everything about them, they have been the best team. So I don't know why people are acting like this now where it's like, oh, they just had this easy path. It's the Celtics. No matter who they played, they would have had an easy path. Yes, a healthy Embiid could have given them more struggles. A healthy Giannis could give them more struggles. A healthy Knicks team could have given them more struggles. But overall, none of these teams expected to beat the Celtics. Obviously, they could have, but the Celtics were the betting favorite for a reason. They're the only team that have negative odds right now to win the playoffs. So they had negative odds from the beginning. They're still here. What do you expect? You can't, they can only play the teams that are in front of them. The Pacers had the same issue. You can only play the teams that are in front of them. You can't critique a team for beating a team that's beat up or just lower a team that shouldn't be in the position they are, talking about the Pacers. You can't really critique a team for that. They beat the teams that are in front of them. They've only lost 2 games throughout the entire playoffs. What more can you ask out of this team? There's a lot of hate on Jason Tatum, which I guess is understandable. He hasn't been performing too well. He didn't perform very well whenever they made it to the finals against the Warriors in 22. So, I mean, there is some fair critiques with him, and especially since Jaylen Brown ended up winning the conference finals MVP. It's, that debate is going to talk up a lot more. But overall, I just think there's so much. I feel like the Celtics are so good. Their series were so boring that people are just nitpicking at things they can complain about with this team, because people love talking negative. People don't like talking positive. Sorry, now that rant is out of the way, my main concern with the Celtics, and we've seen this throughout the entire playoffs, especially in this Pacers series, they rely too much on their perimeter game. They don't really run fluid offensive sets. It's kind of like give the ball to Jason Tatum, let him try and create a shot. He's going to take a bad sidestep shot, whatever. Give the ball to Jaylen Brown, let him try and dribble his way through someone. No left hand, dribble to the right, dunk on someone. And if that doesn't work, late shot clock, give it to Derek White or Drew Holiday. Maybe they can throw up a shot. Drew Holiday hasn't been shooting very good. Derek White has been shooting pretty good, I would say. Jason Tatum hasn't been shooting very good. And his team relies so much on the three-point shooting. Kristaps Porzingis, I believe, is coming back, but who knows how he's going to look just throwing him into the finals after not playing pretty much the past 2 series in the playoffs. It's a little scary for me. Just because the Celtics, like I said, haven't been shooting the ball too well, and that's pretty much what they rely on is just their three-point shot. They don't really get easy looks like they should. They don't get to the foul line as much as they should, although they do. They just don't do as much as you would like them to. And that's kind of reflects on Jason Tatum's game. I have a lot of gripes about Jason Tatum's game. which kind of reflects just the way the Celtics play. He takes a lot of, like I said, sidesteps, step back, turnaround threes. He takes a lot of hard shots, but he doesn't take enough of the easy shots. He doesn't get to the rim enough. He doesn't get to the foul line enough. Enough complaining. Another concern is I don't think Derek White and Drew Holiday, while these are two, in my opinion, the two best perimeter defenders in the entire league, I don't think either of them are big enough to hold Luka. I think Drew Holiday might be the better bet just because he is a bit of a stronger, more footwork heavy kind of guy than Derek White. But I just think they're both too small to guard Luka, which means you're going to see Tatum or Jaylen Brown guarding Luka. And if it's either one of those guys, that's not going to be good because they're going to be wearing out all their energy trying to guard Luka. And then that's going to kind of negatively impact their offensive production. Because you look at the Timberwolves, Anthony Edwards didn't have to guard him. Cat didn't have to guard him because they had a guy like Kyle Anderson or Jaden McDaniels on him pretty much at all times. But yeah, I just don't think those two guys are big enough to guard him. And like I said, that's going to hurt their offensive production because their two best offensive players are going to be putting in so much effort on the defensive end that it's going to be hard to kind of put that energy back in on the offensive end because they're not going to have as much to put up. But I've talked about my concerns with the Celtics. The main thing that I see as a positive with the Celtics is they have 5 of the 7 best players in this series, if that makes any sense. So if you look at the 7 best players in this series, they have 5 of them. I'd even go as far to argue they might even have 6 of the best 8. But best player in this series, no doubt, Luka. But then you have Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and then you probably put Kyrie Irving in there. So we have 2 out of 4 so far. But then you have Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis. That's the other 5. So they have 5 of the 7 best players. And if you want to throw Al Horford in, I don't think he's better than anybody else on the Mavericks. So I would just stick to 5 out of 7. That's a very top-heavy team. They definitely have way more talent than the Mavericks do, but I believe the Mavericks have more of a identity and they have more team chemistry. They have more of that just that like willpower / just like urge to win. The Celtics kind of feel like they're a team that's just too sexy to try to do the dirty work and try to do all the little things that help them win the championship other than like Drew Holiday and Derek White. But you look at their main players pretty much. It's scary. You look at the Mavericks, I think they're going to constantly put Al Horford and they're going to constantly put Kristaps Porzingis in a pick and roll with Luka, and he's always going to make the right decision no matter what coverage you throw at him. We saw the Timberwolves throw 5 different pick and roll coverages. They blitzed him, they hedged it, they switched, they didn't switch and they just stuck with their man. And then the 5th roll, they would play drop coverage on him. They did so many different coverages in the pick and roll and none of them worked. So, I'm just saying Luka is the best player in the series, and historically you look, the winners of every finals matchup has the better player, like the best player in the series. Will that be the case here, or will it be the better team? I'm not sure. Celtics, let me just get this out of the way. Celtics are better on paper. Mavericks are better on the court. And I just kind of want to mention just real quick, how would this ring kind of impact each player? Like in terms of each star player, Jaylen Brown / Jason Tatum or Luka / Kyrie. You look at Luka getting this ring at the age of 25. I believe he's only 25 still, which is crazy to think about. That would really propel his legacy. Obviously, they're all very young. It's kind of weird to talk about legacy with such young players, except for Kyrie. But you look at Luka getting a ring at such a young age, being the best player on the team. That would bolster him. I think that put him into the top 4, maybe even top 3 best player in the league conversation. I don't think he'd be top 3 just because you still have Embiid, Giannis, and Jokic, but I still think that put him up there in the top 4, undoubtedly. No conversation. Kyrie Irving getting this ring would help him just a lot. Like, I think I saw the Jeff Teague podcast was talking about it. This would cement him in the top 5 point guard of all time conversation. I know obviously people say he's up there, but not everyone agrees. I think this would cement him into that spot. It'd be no conversation. On the flip side, Jason Tatum has been to the finals, I believe, or not the finals, but he's been in the playoffs every year of his career and he hasn't won. I think he's maybe been there 5 or 6 times and he's made it to the finals once. If he doesn't win it this year, there's going to be a lot of talk about his just playoff production because both times they made it to the finals, he wasn't very productive in the entire playoff run. So him winning a ring here would kind of shut up a lot of those people. I don't think it'd help him really that much with talking about best players in the league just because he's on a super team. Same thing pretty much goes with Jaylen Brown. I think their spot that they're in and sort of like the top players in the league, I don't think they'd go up just because it's such a good team. They're kind of expected to win, which sucks for them. But it is what it is. You can't really just change the whole idea of the consensus idea of the general public. Sorry, that was really hard for me to get out. But that's pretty much all I want to talk about just in terms of these playoffs. My prediction for this is Celtics in 6. Hold on, let me think. You know what? I'm going to be different. I've been betting against the Mavericks the entire time. I've been talking trash. Not really trash, but I've just been talking down on them. I'm going to say Mavericks in 7. I just love what the Mavericks have been doing. But it's the Celtics. I'm pretty much just picking the Mavericks to be different because everyone's saying the Celtics. But I really think the Mavericks have a really good shot at this, which is why I'm putting them in 7. That is all for this video. I don't think I have anything else I want to mention. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hopefully these views are looking a little bit better than my last episode. But I will be putting out draft content once the finals are over, like real draft content, like actual mock drafts and stuff. So I'll see you guys in those episodes. Peace out.